Good afternoon and welcome to the Congress Tumuli and Megaliths in Eurasia. It's a pleasure to be part of this event and I hope you enjoy it. The artifacts that are usually collected from funerary contexts of Neolithic and Chalcolithic periods are almost exclusively related to the deposition of human remains. Occasionally, some crude macrolithic stone tools are also found in the mounds, but usually such artifacts are interpreted as belonging to previous occupations on the vicinities and that were at some point incorporated in the site as part of the overall material used for the construction of these monuments. Among these artifacts, there are also grinding stones and other ground stones that are considered as being coeval of the construction because both monument and artifacts are related with the agricultural societies. Nevertheless, there are also other peculiar and not as clear artifacts that, because of their characteristics, don't fit in any traditional typological list, but have parallels with some ethnographic record and occur systematically in the archaeological record. In this presentation, we will talk about these artifacts, specifically those collected in the megalithic tomb of Cabeça de Anta, located in the municipality of Proença Nova, in the north margin of the Lower Tejo. This territory is rolling hilling with abundant and deeply incised streams that cut a landscape made of schist, grey rock, quartzite bedrocks, and also remnants of quaternary terraces with gravels of all these rocks. A more detailed information about the landscape and the transportation of raw materials across it will be presented by Batista and colleagues further in this Congress. Now, one of the major cultural landmarks of the region of Proença Nova, and inland Portugal, it's the megalithism. Presently, there are more than 300 megalithic sites that include dolmens, mounds, menhirs, and cromlechs, all dated between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, which were found, mapped, and studied for different teams along the last century. One of these sites is the megalithic tomb of Cabeça de Anta. The megalithic tomb of Cabeça de Anta is the greatest of the entire region, with 4 meters high, with the largest mound of 38 meters of diameter, and also with the biggest chamber. So this is the biggest monument on the entire region. Its size stands out in the landscape in such a way that was used to place a geodesic marker in 1881, which geodesic marker is still in use. It has the particularity of being all made of schist slabs, which makes it particularly difficult to build and to preserve. Exceptions of schist, it's a single slab adjacent to the slab of the headstone, that is, in this case, in quartzite, and that was carried from far away. Again, if you want to know further about this transportation of this specific piece, please see the communication of Batista and colleagues. They will give you much more details about it. The site of Cabeça de Anta is known by the population since ever and gives the toponymic name to the place. The first record about it comes from the documentation made by Georg and Vera Leisner that found it in 1945 during their survey across the Portuguese territory for megalithic monuments. However, and despite its size and knowledge by the population, the excavation started only in 2014 within the project led by our colleague João Caninas in the scope of the Proença Nova Archaeological Field Camp that is still ongoing. So since then, the dolmen of Cabeça de Anta has been continuously excavated every year in several areas. These include the chamber, part of the corridor, and an area corresponding to the limit of the mound, and also in 4 trenches that start in the chamber down to the external limit of the mound. These works allow to get a clear detail about the stratigraphy and also about the structure of the monument, including of its mound. For instance, the excavation of the trench revealed that the mound is completely artificial and made with mortars that were intentionally created through the planned manipulation of large quantities of different local clays. Besides that, there is also a 20 to 40 centimeters thick man-made lens composed of imbricated rocks from local schist and particularly grey rock. For those interested in the detailed study of these clays, please watch also the presentation that will be given by Tsupra and colleagues also in this Congress. Now, among the rocks that make this distinctive lens, some caught our attention. This happens because of their shape, of their shapes and sizes, but particularly because they had a functional-like morphology, rude but still distinctive ergonomic parts, and some had even some marks suggesting they have been used in some heavy-duty tasks. Another aspect that made them even more intriguing was the fact that after they caught our attention in the first place, they seemed to pop up, ending being systematically collected from the cairn on the 15 by 1 trench that cuts through the mound. Presently, we have them to the dozens, some, of course, more evident than others. Despite a clearly diversity exists between these artifacts, there is still some patterns. First, they are always made of grey rock. Secondly, they have a natural shape and sometimes located crude napping that combine results on the creation of a broad, similar morphology. This consists on 2 distinctive parts, being one thinner but still strong and able to be grabbed by an adult, while the other is large and flattened, where the marks that seem to result from use wear are usually located. Overall, these instruments show a design that resembles something between a cricket bat, hand shovels, and stirrers, with a handle and a blade that, again, along with the macroscopic wear and notching consistently located in the blade, seem to support, at least for now, the possibility of having been used. Here's another example. Artifacts that fall outside the standard typological lists have been reported from several places in early agriculture contexts and an intercontinental scale. For instance, in North America, Padilla 2017 studied the diversity of groundstones from the Milestone Horizon period of Southern California, which lasts from about 4,000 to 1,500, and was able, BP of course, and was able to relate hammerstones, methods, manos, pestles, and scraper plants with the processing of plant material, fruits, seeds, and also by protein residue analysis for the processing of small mammals such as pronghorn, rat, waterfowl, rabbit, fish, and plants such as the yucca. Also, in India, Mitri and Neog 2016 report artifacts very similar to this, interpreted as axes and hadzes and chisels, sometimes related with funerary contexts in several Neolithic sites from the Khasi Hills on the Meghalaya region. In this case, also with what seems to be apparently gripping, tanked, and hefting zones. In the Iberian Peninsula, other artifacts such as these, sometimes decorated and with slightly larger dimensions, but not always, have been systematically reported in several Neolithic sites. In these cases, they are apparently related to both functional and eventually symbolic purposes, but again, the lack of an overall standardization and aesthetics of each one of these artifacts may have led to their being discarded during excavations, meaning that we may eventually find them piled up among the back dirt of some of the excavations. A particular interesting case is the case of Obreira de Cima e Pogium, which is a situation where artifacts such as these were found in obvious contexts and clustered and spiked on the floor in an organized fashion, suggesting a function but also a ritualistic purpose. Besides what common sense tends to lead us as persons and not as archaeology, particularly processualist archaeologists such as myself, and besides the archaeological record, the ethnographic data also supports the possibility of these artifacts being tools. In fact, several artifacts such as these, or very similar, were reported from several places in the world and identified usually as heads. Thus, this may be a possibility that, in our interpretation, allows to ground a research project on the study of such artifacts and the meaning they have in the context. Therefore, our intention was to have a much detailed study of these artifacts by now, which was not possible to the pandemic situation, and such study was to include two lines of research. One that concerns the detailed technological and morphological analysis of each one of the artifacts, and also the mapping in each artifact of the location of those potential use-where marks. The other line of approach concerns the sampling and mapping of natural blocks in the landscape that could support these artifacts, the configuration of these blocks, in order to access how will they respond to intentional mapping, and finally, their use in different tasks, particularly the digging of sediments in different areas around the site, from fluvial sediment to soft rock ground such as those in schist, but particularly using them during the production of mortars similar to those which were found and with which the mound was made of. So the study of these artifacts opened perspectives of accessing to informal tools, which we admit at this point with higher possibility that may have been used for the construction of Cabeça de Anta. Despite they were not found packed on the floor, such as those of Obreira de Cima e Pogium, they were clearly deposited in an intentional rocky lens that distinctively marks the stratigraphy of the mound and makes a main part of its construction, eventually also of its preservation until our days. In this case, it will be hard to reach out the reasons behind their deposition in such layer. A conservative hypothesis or possibility is that they were discarded among other pieces of rock after their functional purpose ended, just as a piece of rock, just like any other. A more ambitious possibility is that they were had as part of a ritualistic behavior. But both possibilities are as valid as hard to reach, even if a pattern of presence of such artifacts exists in other mounds from the region and beyond it. What we will be able to understand is the construction patterns of these prehistoric people and the relevance that each layer played in the conservation of the sites until our days. eventually the role that these artifacts had during the construction or the production of the mortars that made these monuments. Eventually, this study may also allow us to access some wisdom about the use of local resources to make large construction that lasts for millennia, which may contribute to planning more sustainable ways of life in the scope of the threats that we are presently living in the 21st century. For now, it's all, and thank you very much for your presence.